Right. Afternoon, everybody. Mark David from Music Venue Trust here. This is a what time is it? Saturday evening, 6 p.m. This is a webinar, a quick guide to the REVS checklist and cost toolkit that we have just issued to you via the mailing list, and it's available in the MVA group. This is probably the most important part so far of our reopen venue safely process. It is the point at which government has given us the draft guidelines of how you may be able to open on Saturday, the 4th of July is the current timeline. Now, that does not mean you'll be able to open, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, but it means that there will be issued next Saturday, the 13th of June. We expect there to be issued the final version of these guidelines, but we're pretty certain we know what's in them. And the purpose of the REVS document, which some of you have seen and you know you've had sort of the protocols and guidance on, is to ensure that we very, very quickly respond as a whole sector to anything that government sends us. We had this draft guidance. We saw initially we saw a pubs and bars version of it, which we commented on just over about 8 days ago. And that resulted in a supplementary piece of guidance called the entertainment guidance for pubs and bars, which we were able to work on and to provide additional advice to government on. And then since then, pretty much we've been working on their specific guidance that they're going to issue for grassroots music venues. And we finally received that. Well, I think I'm going to bring in my healthy associate, because I think you can guess we're all pretty tired. I've got a very big team. And you know, I should start with this. We've had a big team of people working on this, and we literally have worked 24 hours a day on it for the last 3 days. I think there was a period between 3:30 and 4:30 in the morning on whatever day that was, Thursday night, that we weren't working. But other than that, it's been flat out for the whole 72 hours. And hopefully when you see the guidance, you'll appreciate how well it was. So the first thing to say is, I have to say a huge thank you to the core team here at MVT, particularly Sarah, who really has worked extraordinary hours to get this to you. And then also Mena and Clara and of course Bev. But in this particular exercise, I want to say a huge thank you to Nick Stewart, who's put in an astonishing number of hours from Sneaky Peaks up in Edinburgh. We've had another team of people on this. We've also had guidance and support from Arif at the Night Owl, Stuart at 229. We've had people come in and give us guidance. There's a guy called Scott McDonald. Not many of you will know. He's a public health like safety person. I'm getting a cough. That's not good, is it? And then we've been very lucky to get. We had Julie Tippins from DHP. Their risk management person came in and worked with us, and we had Helen McGee from Academy Group came in, gave us some guidance as well. So I want to thank you to all of them. And then the final person I want to say thank you to, with a bit of drum roll, is Mr. Chris Sherrington. How are you?
The drum roll, seeing as Bev's not here.
Yeah, like that.
Thank you.
So first thing to note, Chris, is that this is the first time that I've seen you with your hair done properly in the last 72 hours. Have you done it specially? Because we've got
especially for the masses. Hello to the Music Venue Alliance group. Hello, everyone.
Right. So I think it's fair to say that this has been a bit of a task, Chris.
It has, yeah.
I mean, just to confirm, I think we received this document at about 11 o'clock on Thursday morning, didn't we?
Yeah, we got the final version of the draft, or the final version of a draft. and we had to build everything from that. But it's been really good to work on it with everyone.
Yeah. I mean, we were working on it a little bit before that. We were working obviously to try and work out what might be in it. We were also working on what some questions that you would need to know for yourselves would be required. So, Chris, I think I'll just explain. And you ask me any questions that any venue owners might ask that I miss because I'm tired. Somebody says Chris Sherrington is a legend. There you go.
There you go.
Good review, isn't it?
That's right. I can't do so it's fine.
Yeah. Right. So to explain this, what we are asking you to take part in now is not a risk assessment. You will not end up with a risk assessment from this. This is the part of the REVS process. If everybody knows that, this is the part at which we report to government, having been told what the draft guidance will likely be. We report to government what the sector thinks about that and what our reaction to it is and how deliverable it is. And then from having undertaken that process, any of you that may feel that you're able to do it, then you would create a risk assessment, which I think, Chris, is the plan to provide more help and guidance for people to do that. Is that?
Yes, so it will be. This will form a lot of the questions and a lot of the things that people will be thinking about in this will go into the risk assessment stuff that people will need to do. So it's really good for them to go through that. But it is that will be a tool that we're going to be looking at later on. At the moment, it's mainly focusing on getting the information back to DCMS.
Okay. And so just to explain what sort of, well, first of all, we should explain why. Okay. So why are we doing that? It is incredibly clear to us that this sector will need a sector-specific support deal. No matter whether you are going to open, which we only think a very limited number of you will be able to do, but the guidance is there. Maybe you can do it in your venue, maybe you can't, we don't know. If you are planning to open, specifically this toolkit will lead you through the process of understanding how much that's likely to cost you. And it tells us how much it's likely to cost you, and then we can tell government that. So if you are in the Venn diagram of venues that are able to do this, then we need to know how much is it going to cost. That's it, okay? So there's no point, and you have to do this if you're thinking about, we must be able to tell government how much it's going to cost. The much bigger bubble we're expecting to see is the venues that cannot do this. I think that's fairly fair, isn't it, Chris? I think, yeah, I think we are expecting a very large percentage of you to not be able to comply with the guidance and not to be able to open on Saturday, 4th of July for any type of live music. Those of you who cannot do that, the government support that they've already announced effectively ends on 30th of June. We know it's already ended and it's not been enough. But from the 1st of July, there is an opportunity perhaps to have a sector support deal to enable those of you who have not managed to open, most of you, to get payments and support to remain closed. And so this toolkit, the REVS checklist and cost toolkit, leads you through the process from beginning to end for us to understand. In section A and B, is that right, Chris? I really do need help here after all this.
So just to reiterate that, the important thing is that it's all right as saying that we can't open and we can't follow aspects of the guidance, but unless we can quantify that and actually physically say to government the exact points that we can't do and why we can't do it, and also even if something is practical, the financial cost of it is too abhorrent for us to be able to do, that they won't be able to put any support package together. They won't believe us, basically. We can't just go with anecdotal evidence. So we need to actually have pretty much every venue say this is why we can't do it if we can't do it. So section A, as what I'm saying, is a section which basically gives MVT some information about the venue as to things like capacity, where you're based, what kind of programming you put on, and whether or not you could then change your capacity if you were asked to do seating and things like that.
Well, should we do section A and then we can move through? So I'm going to add that in.
You into the questionnaire as well.
Yeah. So I have to come off this screen and go and do it, Chris. But I mean, as you can see here, we got section A is about your venue. First of all, there's an explanation of what this whole form is about. Then here, it asks for your email address. Very important point here is when this is a long process and it's led you through in, there are 4 sections, aren't there, Chris? Is that right?
4 actual surveys, which all link together. But okay. You'll get, after you've done each survey, you will get given, you'll receive an email which gives you your answers. So you can then use that for your risk assessments and stuff, which is really useful. But you can also take a break for one thing, and then carry on with the next section. And it will also, I would say one thing that's really important is at the beginning of each section, to read all of the things, because there are things that people might need, which might be things like their venue layout, or they might need to have their costs for things like security in one of the sections. And so please read this initial section where it tells you what you will need, and then read it again before you move on. We ask at the beginning of each section to put your email address in, mainly so that when we get the data, we can link all of these surveys together, because it is
and also, Chris, on the next screen, in fact, we also ask what is the name of your venue.
Yeah.
And which we ask in every section. So in every section, you must give us your email and the name of your venue so that we can put all your information together and give a clear picture of your venue. I'm going to fill virtually nothing in just so we can move forward. I'm going to claim that my venue is in Northern Ireland because I'm feeling Northern Irish today. So, and I'm going to call it M. So that's just, where you are. And then on the next screen, we get into the things about how many events do you hold.
And that's per month, just to be clear, yeah. People need to work out how many it is per month. If you've got an annual figure, then, of course, divide it down by 12. If you've got a weekly figure, then move it up to per month. And
then this question is just so that we can frame this conversation to government. We're just looking for, like, what would be the loss if a number of venues weren't able to do a particular type of show. We're also just trying to analyze. We're going to see seated venues. That's the first thing to tell you. It's almost definitely going to be only seated. And because of that, we suspect that some of you involved in things like folk or classical or jazz may be more likely to be able to do an event. So, and I've put a thing in there. We're trying to keep you amused in the form, although it's not very easy. Please don't write in hundreds of genres, okay? Because it's just not worth it. We need very broad brush strokes. Let's just choose one. I'm going to say we do theatre, and then bottom question here: what is the average number of performers? Just to explain on that question, we need you to think about. If you do 3 band builds and there are 4 people in each band, it's 12 performers in total. The reason we need that number, I'm going to write 12, is because your capacity is now severely limited and we need to know how many of it may be used up by performers. Okay, and you need to know that as well. If your new capacity is 12 and you put on 3 band bills, you don't have a capacity for the audience. Okay, so that's pretty important. Then the next page. Chris, do you want to do this one?
Yeah, so the next page kicks off with, on average, oh, sorry, bear with me 2 seconds. I'm just trying to see it on my screen so I can get through. It basically goes through, there are 4 options here, and it's about what type of events you hold and what your venue is like. So for a lot of venues where it's a standing only venue, you'll select the first option. If you're a seated only venue, then select the second option. The third option is where you are a seated and standing venue and where the seats are fixed in a certain place or allocation. So, for example, if you've got a balcony with seats, or if you've got fixed seating around the edge of the venue, so you cannot clear that seating out the way. And the final one is where you've got a flexible allocation, which is like my venue in York, where we can sometimes put seats in and we have a standing space and we can vary the capacity between the two. These take you on slightly different routes through the questionnaire. The other thing that's important to say at this point, actually, is if at any point in the questionnaire you realise that you are on the wrong route, you've perhaps selected standing and it's actually standing and seating, is you can go back. You can also go back at any point in the questionnaire, but to do that, click on back. Do not refresh your screen because it will kick you out of the survey.
So it's down at the bottom of each screen. I'll go back and I think we'll do standing only because we want to move fairly quickly through these. But so it's standing only. Let's imagine. And then on this screen, you're going to see exactly what we're talking about. There's some information on here. Immediately, the government guidelines talk about 2 meters social distancing. Now, first of all, you should really have a premises layout. And if you have a premises license, somebody somewhere has a premises layout and you want to get hold of it. If you do not have that when you're doing this form, you can use a broad calculation that we have done for you, which is that approximately 2 meters social distancing equates to 10% of your capacity and 1 meter social distancing equates to 30% of your capacity. Chris, where did we get that? We basically modeled some venues, didn't we?
We did, yes. So we've taken a selection of venues which we've modelled using this circle modelling. You can also it has got the link to the tool that we sent out, which was on one of the most recent mailings, but you can just go straight to it there. And there's a little description in that group. Once you go to that tool, it tells you how to use it. And that is basically a piece of paper that you can put over your venue layout at the right scale. Alternative, the other way that you can do it, and it is actually in the description, if you click on that link, it tells you that actually you can also do it by square meterage if you've got an idea of that as well, which would be to divide it by 4 for 2 meters and just divide it in by 1 for your 1 meter. These are very rough, and to be fair, we want best guesses, but we want you to go through this exercise so that you can get what you feel is your capacity and what you're comfortable with.
Okay,
so to go through.
A couple of questions are coming straight away. Question on performers as it relates to reducing capacity. Some bands can have up to 2 to 10 person crews with them. We'll come to that in the guidance. The government guidance recommendation is that you try to reduce the size of crews, but yes, you would need to count crews within your total capacity. Your total capacity is now your total capacity you have available. Question on layout. Do we have a 2 meter one-way system around the venue for 2 meter distancing? There is some leeway on that in the guidance. We'll come on to that in a little while. Okay. I think Nick might be in the room, and if he is, I can't see his name, but I think he is. So 50 cap less 10 artists and crew and 2 bar staff leaves 38. That's the calculation, correct?
The thing as well around why the performers thing is important is because, of course, for many, we always encourage bands to watch the other bands, and so they're usually going to be in the room when they're not performing, and so they will probably be in an audience space and taking up the capacity that way as well.
So just for the sake of doing it I'm going to say 200, and because we don't have a particular layout, I'm going to say that the standing capacity would be reduced to 20, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And then the standing capacity at 1 meter will be reduced to 60, correct?
Look at him do the maths.
Yeah. Would you consider hosting seated only shows by bringing in hired seats from elsewhere? If your answer to this is no, I have to tell you the Saturday the 4th of July guidance means you probably can't open. That's as blunt as that. So the Saturday 4th of July guidance is pretty much aimed at those who can do seated. They do not trust people to stand yet. But for the sake of this, I'm going to put yes, just so we can see what would happen next. And what would happen next is a good note here is that we're always asking you for numbers. We don't need you to put symbols. If it's a question about money, whatever it is, if it's numbers, it's always just going to be the characters 0 to 9. So what would be your capacity if you're hired in temporary seating for an event with 2 meter social distancing? The interesting thing about the seated stuff is, from what I can see, Chris, in fact, seated capacity, particularly around household bubbles, could potentially be slightly higher, couldn't it?
It can, yeah, you can, particularly if you've got the ability to put, as Mark says, people in house bubbles. The only thing that could be an issue is, of course, with seating capacity. If you're putting in hired seats, you do then need to allow for aisles and for transitional spaces. We're calling it people moving around, so that could take it down as well. The thing earlier, actually, where someone was saying about, I just want to answer that now because it applies to this, is that the assumptions that we made when we're looking at that kind of circle modeling is that although you gain something from us, not from household groups, because couples, for example, take up less space, you lose that from the fact that you then need to allow space for people to move around. So everything you lose, you kind of gain on the other. So that's why we haven't allowed for either of those things when we model it. It's just a room of circles, but it is a very good guess, really.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then where are we gone here about your venue? Oh, that's gone to a weird place. Okay. I'm just gonna write a number in there just for the sake of it. We need to sort that one out, Chris.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I did put an answer in. Okay. The next question is about additional services. Everything that the government guidance is about that we're getting that we need you to respond to is about you hosting events, whether that's DJs or whether it's live bands or whatever it is. It's about events. To be very clear, we have fought extremely hard that music venues will not be in a category all of their own when it comes to anything else. If pubs and bars are allowed to open, you will be allowed to open as a pub and bar. And we have specifically asked for a variation on licensing, where if you are currently only allowed to be open if you have live entertainment on, we're looking for confirmation from government that you will in fact be able to open without entertainment on. So you won't, in this particular phase of opening, you may be well able to open as something else. So if you have enough space, obviously, all these other things we're telling you about apply, but you may be able to open just to be a pub or a bar or, exhibition space or a nightclub. I'm going to put community centre. Do you believe you could operate in one of your more alternative services? Very important question, this. I'm going to put no, just for the sake of it, just so that we can see where we go with that. But yeah. Okay, so when you come to the end of a form, you will see this screen. Basically, I have submitted it, which means I will get a report about it. And on the next page, there is a form. That's the link to the next part of the survey. Now, just on how we've had to, how it's driven us all mad, Chris, I mean, that probably takes less than 5 minutes to do if somebody's organized.
Yeah.
But we are heavily recommending that when you go into section B, which is, believe it or not, in 2 sections, we strongly recommend that you pause, get everything organized, because once you're into a survey, there are a lot of questions, and you do carefully need to read every question, and you need to give the most accurate answer that you can. So basically, that was section A. And as you can see, it is just really practical questions. What kind of venue are you? What's your normal capacity? What will your capacity be with 2 meters and potentially with 1 meter? We should say we don't know if the government may vary that, but it does seem possible they might do. So we're looking for what difference that might make as part of the case we make to government. Somebody's asked, our cap for live shows is 100 less than for club nights due to this being over 2 floors. I presume for this I should go on live cap. Yes. Also, with the amount of shows per month, should that include club nights? Yes, it should, because we want to represent how much you're losing across all the different things you do. And in fact, in our breakdown, it does say about house nights or anything else. So you can tick all the boxes to say what kind of stuff you're doing.
Also, and you have more than 2 rooms, for example, and you've got multiple events. Your events per month could well be over 30. Or if you have matinee shows and stuff like that, it's important to factor both of that in as well.
Okay, then moving on, let's talk about the next section, because this is the one that nearly killed us. We have received the draft government guidance. It's not in the public domain, and we're not allowed to send it to you because they haven't finished it. However, we are allowed to ask you questions about what is your reaction to what's in it. So we are asking you those questions, and the more astute amongst you will be able to work out that the questions that we are asking you may, stares down camera, perhaps give you a complete picture of what is going to be in the guidance that we're not allowed to show you. How's that? Is that about right, Chris?
All right. The important thing is as well, by the way, I think we should explain for that. These are not the questions necessarily that we were originally going to want to ask you. Our questions would have been asked a lot nicer in much clearer sentences, let's say. But if other people have seen, and I know a lot of venues have been looking at the guidance that have already come around for other sectors, such as shops, construction, things like that, they will see that there are specific sections, specific ways of wording things, which are very much government speak. And in order to best allow us to answer the questions that we'll get from government, where basically we're saying, with this particular question that you, or particular bit of guidance that you have given us, 95% of venues can't do that. In order to do that, we need to ask the question in exactly the same way as the government has written the guidance to us.
Well, not exactly the same way, though, Chris. We wouldn't do that.
Why? No, it's slightly different. Mainly with the word "can you?"
inserted 195 times. Right, I wanted.
If people do want a really good reason to do this questionnaire, it is because you will get a sneak peek almost of the guidance, but not in the guidance. It's questions.
Yes, we're just asking you questions. Okay, what's really important is to say up front, this section is huge. It's so big that we broke Google Forms, which is the reason why we were slightly late. Poor old Sarah was plowing away trying to get this done until I think 1 o'clock this morning, and then I jumped in and did another bunch of stuff. Somebody says 100% of the questions are direct from the guide. I don't know why they've said that. That's outrageous.
Crazy talk.
Outrageous slur on what we're doing here. Right, so a really important. It's huge. It's so big we've divided it into two parts. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on this section, believe it or not, because I think this is something we're going to have to cover in the meetings on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And I want to tell everybody how important it is for you to come to one of those meetings. They're so important. We're doing the same meeting 6 times. Okay, so we're going to do it 6 times. Same meeting, just pick one that works the best for you. I think we've allocated an hour and a half or 2 hours for each of those meetings. There's 2 on Monday, 2 at different times on Tuesday, and 2 at different times again on Wednesday. So hopefully everybody can find a slot that works for them. And you're welcome to come to more than one meeting. And we will be sending you out guidance on Monday morning prior to the first meeting about how to ask questions in advance of the meeting and how to ask questions in the meeting, so that basically we can try and cover everything. Somebody else says, Phil Stupid asking, where is the form? It's in the MVA group. If you look down a post, there's a link to it in the big long post. I think it's in the announcements.
And there's been a mail as well today with it in as well.
Yeah, and it's in your mail out. You should have received a mail out. If you haven't received a mail out, please look at your spam. Please check your spam for messages from musicvenuetrust.com, which quite often gets labeled as spam. So, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen. But Chris, do you want to? I mean, I'm going to give basically what I need you to do is I'm going to try and fill this in as fast as possibly can be filled in, and you can just shout random questions as you see them. So I'm going to share the screen.
There's one thing that actually I think is really important to say here, which is that this section is about the practical ability of you to do these things. It is not necessarily about the financial. We want you to consider the cost, but actually the important thing is that it's the practical ability to do this. So for certain things, there are things that you might generally not be able to do at the moment, but if, for example, you were to be able to have an extra security guard, then you could do. Or if you were to have like a laptop or remote working or screens. We want you to be as positive, I think, is probably the way of doing it, because we need to show what things can practically be done. And actually quite a lot of them are yeses. But we clearly then need you to consider what the financial cost, because if we are looking at the financial cost, and so we're saying, well, actually, these things we could do, but you'd have to give us this much money to do it. I think that's
a very good explanation. Okay, so you will see there that in this is part one of the section B, which is complying with guidance. Part one contains 3 parts: the risk assessment, which is, in order to be open, you will have to have a risk assessment, and we will try and support you to make that if you're not used to the process. It's one of those occasions where it would be incredibly helpful if a group of people formed, or if a group of you are planning to open or trying to open. We'd like to see you all sharing risk assessments with each other. We'd like the MVA group to really share all the experience there is. Just to go back, we were very lucky to get people into a risk assessment group to help us think about what we might need to do here. So that's been really good. And we'll probably reconvene that group next week, maybe after we finish these meetings, to try and get that risk assessment. Then
we'll be asked, licensing and stuff, if they come in, and police and stuff like that will basically be asking those kind of questions. Have you done risk assessments? Because if you haven't, then you won't be allowed to open. You
won't be allowed to open. Okay, so then part 2 is who should go to work. And this is our impression of what might be in the guidance. Again, wink. And physical distancing at work. So these are the 3 sections. Chris, do you want to talk? And because I believe there are 180 questions in this section, but I'm going to try and fill them in.
Yeah. So the first section here is about risk assessments. And as we say, this isn't a risk assessment, but it is a really useful tool, because all the things that you'll need to think about when doing your risk assessment are based on the government guidance. And this is not the government guidance. Yes, it is. It's not. So you'll need to go through that.
Just so first screen there was, do you have a layout plan? If you don't have a layout plan, it will refer you to our broad calculation, but we recommend that you have a layout plan. Yeah. And do you have an understanding of risk analysis? I'm going to put yes, but again, just to let you know, we will be helping you with risk analysis and risk assessment. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll stick on this screen just slightly so you can talk about. This is the type of question that you'll see.
Yeah. So the type of question that the government guidance will ask is quite broad, as we said. So it's kind of thing: can you designate areas in your venue for different uses in an event? So could you say that somewhere is an audience area? Could you say that somewhere is a service area? And also, most people probably say yes to that. There's then things along. So can you then say that these areas may change from being service areas so you might need to make an area bigger when a band has finished, for example, so that you can then serve more beer. With all of these, the other thing that's really important, we've put 3 options of yes, no, and I don't know. Now, yes and no would be the favourable answers. It gives us more information. If you honestly don't know, then fine, put I don't know. And that means that we also get an idea of actually what people do understand and what they don't understand. But we would encourage people to actually put down an honest answer of yes or no as the primary thing, but put down I don't know if you don't, or if you can't do certain things as well. They then got things about local authorities. So can you talk to local authorities? Where are you up to, Mark? Yeah. And then
I'm literally going through as fast as I can. I'm giving people a slightly pause on screens, but I don't want to run through each question. It will take hours.
Yeah. And so it's mainly also things like, can you share this with your staff? Can you go through things with your staff and aspects like that? It's very important. Bear with me. I'm just going to make you bigger so I can see your screen clearer. So yeah, we've got complying with guidance here. One of the key things here is around, you need to know the difference between clinically vulnerable staff and clinically extremely vulnerable staff, because you might have staff who literally can't come to work at all, and we need to know information about that. Also, have you got the facility? This is talking about, have you got the facility to allow staff to isolate, and can they work from home? So, for example, your booking staff could probably work from home, but of course, your bar staff probably can't. You've got here about, can you understand, take into account particular circumstances? So, every government document has a lot of wording around equality and accessibility, and that's really important. We need to be able to show whether or not you can or can't do these things. Whether or not you can make more reasonable adjustments to allow disabled workers to be able to have no issues with working, and we need to consider all those things, because actually some of those issues might become much more difficult with social distancing. Then we go into the next section, which is, again, this is all talking about your staff, by the way, this section. It's not talking about customers. So it's basically saying that how can your staff do social distancing? Can you do the things that government has included as being important, like increasing the frequency of hand washing? As we say, this isn't talking about the financials. So don't say, well, we can't do it because I haven't got any sanitizer. Yes, you might need to buy sanitizer, but those are things that you can get in. Can you reduce the number of people working? And it also talks about whether or not you can do things like working together in teams, having bar staff that only do, because actually, although it says don't do social distancing, there are sections actually where government guidance says it's okay to be less than 2 meters away from someone as long as you do other things that mitigate that risk, which may be that they don't face each other, they have screens between them, whatever it is. There's a few sections in here which we know won't apply to many people, so there is that option there to click not applicable. But there's things like if you have uniforms, do your staff take them home? Because if they take them home, then of course that could spread the virus. So you might want to consider doing laundry on site and things like that. Again, there are a lot of questions here which are about you might need to invest in extra tech. Now, whether or not you think you can at the moment, it is worth considering whether or not technical solutions could help you. So these are things like radios for production staff, tablets instead of using sound desks and things like that.
I just pause on this one because it does. Can you introduce one-way flow routes through buildings with floor markings and signage that clearly indicates the direction of flow? So I think, you know, even for staff, you are expected to do that. So the answer of whether you need transit flow areas is yes, basically.
Also, just to be clear as well, the government guidance has been done, and every guidance we do, for every single venue, from the smallest venue up into, you know, the 2,000 capacities and stuff like that. And we're aware that everyone has different staffing, different rosters, different numbers of staff. So actually, some of these things are important for some people, and they won't be for others. So please, even if you think, well, actually, that doesn't apply to me, there's a reason it's there, and it's because it's for another venue. There's things as well around lifts, which of course might not be applicable. Can you assign working spaces? Can you look at the layout of your venue so that staff can move around in different ways? Can you kind of section off bars? And key ones there are things like signage, because of course we're all going to have signage at some point for both staff and for audience members. We need to look at how you can do that and what the cost of that will be, which will be later on.
I'm just going to pause there again and say, does your venue have a food preparation area? I'm going to select no, just because I don't want to tick too many buttons. But there is a section this takes you to.
Yeah, there are specific questions around if you have a kitchen, and that needs to be considered if you do have that. If not, then it goes on. If you've just got a bar space, then you don't need to go through that. Again, this is asking about specific things that you might be able to put in. From this section is for meetings. It is only for meetings, this section. But again, if you're having staff meetings, there are extra things you need to consider, such as could you do it on Zoom? Could you do those kind of things? Again, talking about staffing here, can you basically look at how you stagger your timing for staff to have breaks at different times so they're not all in the same area at the back? You know, if you've got a behind the bar area which people go and take their social breaks in, and it talks about common areas. That's what that section's about. This section is an important one, just a quick one, is that it's around emergencies. So it is clear from the government guidance that if there is emergency, social distancing goes out the window, or rather goes out the fire door like everyone else. And it's important that people understand that. But the thing is, you need to be able to communicate that to people as well. So it may well be that you have to have signage around that and things like that to consider that.
Okay, and then this section is the first one where these supplementary steps are very specific to grassroots music venues.
So these were questions, and this was guidance and questions from that, which was specifically done for us as a grass music sector. We must say as well, I think at this point it's important, Mark, to point out that some of this has also come from other sectors such as theatre and also music studios and other areas as well. So some of them, the wording might be a bit weird for some, but again, it's the guidance wording we were given, and so that's what we based it on. It goes through things like, can you put in screens? It also talks about, interestingly, about stage management. And one important section here is that they've identified that one of the highest risks is for singing because of projection, and also for wind and brass instruments. Your guitars are fine. But yeah, so there are certain things for singers that it is very important, and for wind and brass that we might need to put in extra things that need to do. It does also talk here, interestingly, about the fact that people might be able to work in groups, so brass sections, and that does imply there might be some stuff about bands on stage as well, might be able to work together. It's not absolutely clear yet, but that might be something that happens. That section was just about brass and things. So this, guidelines to maintain sessions between artists with multiple jobs. This section is talking about people that do multiple things and people who interact with multiple groups. So things like your sound engineers, because of course they not only have to deal with talking to one band, they might talk to another. It's also, if you've got people like MCs, it's anyone who's dealing with multiple groups, and also people who are in multiple groups as well.
I've just paused on that question just to say there is a question here: can you consider a private testing program? This actually really comes from theatre orchestras or theatre bands, where if you want to carry on using the band, it's been recommended they may want to form a fixed team, and then the onus may be on the theatre to keep that team together effectively and to continuously test them.
Something production crew as well, whereby, for example, sound engineers, because they're going to deal with so many different people, whether or not they might need their own testing thing to prove that they're okay in between shows.
Okay, so that was section B, part 1.
Yeah, and you'll receive an email at this point again, which, as we said earlier, is actually really useful for when you do your risk assessments and you look at the guidance as to whether or not you've done it. Because you will have considered these measures already, and it's a good starting point.
Okay, Chris Lee, food prep for commercial or staff room, both. Chris, if you're preparing food, you will have to comply with all the guidance. Somebody said no jazz. That was our one hope. No, basically there's jazz on our list, and you know, if you can put on some jazz, I mean, if you can be seated, that can happen. Okay, so I'm going to go straight on to the next part.
Actually, someone makes a good point there, Mark. If there is any of if there are any of these things that have got a cost that you identify, so whether it's screens, barriers, signage, do make a mental note or make a note on something else, because right at the very end of this whole thing, you will be asked to put together an idea of what you think the cost of that will be. So yeah, someone, I don't know, I can't see who it was, but made a good point. It is worth making a note of that as you go along.
Okay. The only note I'm going to make here is that, again, just to remind everybody, you do need to put your email address and your venue in. Please make the effort to make sure that you use exactly the same name for your venue every time. So, you know, if you are sometimes called Exchange Bristol and sometimes called the Bristol Exchange, please pick one and stick with that, because that's how we will filter your results to bring it all together. But again, we're just going to go straight in. This is parts 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah,
managing your sorry.
Yeah, so this is the section that carries on, and it starts to actually be really applicable to us. So it's managing customers and people who are coming onto the site, such as artists and crew and things like that. And then also importantly about cleaning the venue. There's an entire section where you don't have to answer any questions. It's like a dream.
Okay, so again, I'm going to do the same thing again. Just pick some out as you see them.
Yeah. So again, this is basically talking about, are you able to manage your capacity? Are you able to look at whether or not you can use outdoor areas for queuing? Can you? And there are things to consider with that around talking to your local authority, local businesses. Can you also make sure you've got enough car parking spaces to allow for social distancing and bike racks and things like that? Can you encourage customers to have like their own hand wash sections, to have things, sanitation areas and things like that? Things as well around making sure that customers, how they get through the venue, whether or not you have to put stewarding in, traffic light systems. Can you also work with your neighbours and things like that to make sure that things, you're not annoying them, and also you've got enough space outside and things like that. And also there are certain cost things, like you might need coverings. Of course, if it rains, you need to consider that. That next section goes on to actual ordering. So this is your bar service area predominantly. Can you put in social distancing measures? Do you need extra signage? Can you put in ordering apps for people? Again, think about the costs for all of these. Can you encourage contactless payments? So if you don't have contactless payment, could you get that, and how much would that cost you? Can you create physical barriers between your staff and customers? So similar to if you've been to the shops, new screens, could you do that, and how much, could you physically put those in? This next section is just about takeaway or delivery service. So this is for if you're doing food delivery or anything like that as a sideline, or if you've got currently some people are doing drinks deliveries as well. So it's just consider that. I think we can miss that one out, can't we?
Yeah.
And yeah, so this section talks about contactless ordering. Again, I know a lot of people have been talking about apps that they can use. Can you change the service so that you can provide table service and things like that? Can you minimize contact between your staff? And if you've got like people who prepare the drinks and waiting staff, can you minimize that contact? And can you use outdoor areas? This section looks at the social distancing and hygiene for customers. And it's basically, can you also make sure that people know what you expect of them is an important thing. So actually, you may need to start thinking about how you communicate artists, both in the booking process and when they come onto the site, about things that you expect them to do, because they also will be classed as staff. So this section is about managing the customers, managing the audience. So these are things where basically, can you work with people like relevant authorities, stewards, security, and things like that? And can you also engage with artists to make sure that audience behaviors are adhered to? So can you get people to do shout outs? Can you get them to not do things like, hey, everyone, let's do a circle pit, for example?
I think there's a very important question there, so I pause. Can you avoid performances that are likely to encourage audiences' behavior where achieving social distance is likely to be impaired? I think it's very clear to us from this guidance that it's extremely unlikely you're going to be allowed to put idols on in your venue on Saturday the 4th of July.
Hey. So this section is about managing your customers, and this is also, the thing that is specific to our sectors and like theatre as well, is that we need to consider things like ticketing. We need to consider whether or not ticketing partners early on can do things like only offering digital tickets, and also looking at when you get to the box office, things like wristbands, stamps. How do you do those kind of things as well? Again, this is going to be clear again here. This is talking about the practical ability to do this. It's not the financial. So are these things that you could do? Here we have about managing customer cloak. There's a section which is, the next section is just about cloakrooms. If you don't have one, then you can skip that. If you do, there are some important things to go through there. And also then this is about audience management and basically how you expect people to interact at times in the venue.
And I've paused on this one because just to let people know, there is a question in here about whether they're trying to qualify this. Can you manage the risk of alcohol impairing social distancing through, where needed, controls on the purchase and consumption of alcohol? This doesn't read well to us, and we have asked for further clarification on it. We don't think it belongs in the supplementary guidance specific grassroots music venues. We think if they want this, they should put it in the pubs and bars document, and it should apply to everybody. So that's just to let you know that.
Yeah.
Ingress and egress is entrance and exit, by the way.
Yeah. And yeah, so this is looking at audience. So it's talking about audience behaviours. So it is kind of whether or not there are things that you might want to do if you've got a particularly rowdy audience and things like that. What's the next section? Right. The next section is cleaning. Yeah, a lot of people who've already seen some of the government guidance. This is basically being copied and pasted from that into the guidance that you'll see. So, but there are some extra sections that are specific to venues, particularly around ventilation. Because that's the other important thing, is it's not just a matter of how long you're in a space, but how well ventilated that space is. And a lot of these things people are already doing, such as adding extra cleaning. There's an entire section here which is just around if you operate a kitchen, and there are questions which are just in that. If you don't, then you can skip that section. There are things as well. This is all about hygiene standards. So there's things like signage. Can you make sure you clean the toilets more often? But can you also report that? Can you make sure that staff know exactly who are due to be doing the toilets or hygiene at certain times, particularly areas that you'll go through a lot, the high the used areas.
And this is about merch coming on board. So again, you've got to rethink everything that's happening in your venue and analyze it for the risk.
Yeah, so this is all particularly about anything coming into the venue. So merch, you've got load-ins, equipment that's being hired in, even deliveries as well is the other important thing to think about. And can you make sure that actually things are clean when they come in, and what measures you can do to clean those.
And finally, we've made it to section 6, which is our favorite section in the world.
No questions at all. This is about PPE. We know that there will be a lot of people talking about PPE and stuff, but the current government guidance, and we're aware that there have been announcements today from WHO. We've seen things about that, but currently we're going on what the UK government guidance is, and that is that both PPE and, unless there is a role that currently involves PPE, so if you have something that has to involve it, which would be very rare in a venue, then actually you don't really need to consider it. It does say, however, that if you face coverings, if staff do want to, if anyone wants to have a face covering, then you should support that. That is one thing it does say.
Right. And then just finally, this is section 7. This is one of the longest ones there is, I think. And I really am going to fly through this one.
Yeah.
But again, it's about managing social distancing, keeping people apart. Again, there's a section there you can avoid.
Yeah, it's about if you don't have people using if you haven't got customer vehicles, then company vehicles, then just consider that. Some people will. This is also about, can you actually making training documents, and people need to think about the cost of training as well, and it's a time cost for some of that. Can you raise awareness about what needs to be done? This is all about training staff, and also raising awareness with customers, with agents, with artists. All of these things you need to consider. There's a section just about rehearsals at the venue. If you don't host rehearsals at the venue, and we're not talking about sound checks, we're talking about actual rehearsals, you don't need to worry about that. And this is about booking. And there was an important part here where we need to know about, where it asks about local, regional, national, and international, because of course there are different things you need to consider, whether or not it's, whether or not they'll understand the measures because they're an international artist, whether or not they'll be in quarantine and things like that as well. Can you discourage or avoid in performers that are likely to cause issues? Again, similar thing to the idols question there. And also, can you allow extra time to identify and communicate these things to artists and to crew?
This is the equipment section.
This equipment section goes through all the things that you must think about when you've got load-ins, when you've got people sharing equipment, whether or not you can discourage sharing equipment, whether you can store equipment and label it. All of these things are new things you probably have to start thinking about, and possibly whether or not people can't share backline and things like that. This is talking about load-ins and about the actual sound checks, and talks about how can you set out stage plots, how can you sort out sound engineers, how do they interact? Could you use more remote things so you're not having to continue to go to the stage? And also whether or not you might need extra crew for load-ins and things like that because of social distancing.
This is about changeovers.
Yeah, so this section about changeovers is, as it implies, is when you're going from one band transferring to another. Something to factor in here is actually, due to the social distancing, of course, and cleaning as well and things like that, is you might need to give more time for changeovers. This section is about workforce management, where we're talking about if you've got backstage areas and you've got not allowing people to go from backstage to the front of house and mix around the venue.
Changing rooms and showers.
Yeah, the entire section of changing room and showers, if you only apply if you've got changing room and showers, but there is extra cleaning to be done if you do. Then there's just merchandise and meet and greets. So this is basically saying, are the things that you can do to discourage people from talking to the artist at the end of the night, and that artist then talking with multiple people, are the things that you can do around people not touching merch, having examples of merch and things like that.
Okay, we're on to the final part of this section.
Yeah, and the final part of the section is we want to basically get an understanding of how you are feeling about the different things that are going on, whether or not how comfortable you are about opening your venue in July. This allows us to be able to provide information and say, well, actually, we don't, people in the sector are not happy about this. How confident are you that you can effectively do these things? Can you do things under social distancing guidelines? And will you be able to work under subsequent reduced capacities? And again, we encourage people to just be honest here as to how they feel. And then the final question is about current social distancing guidelines, subsequent reduced capacities, and the costs, which leads us on to the next section.
Okay, I'm not going to hit submit for a change. I'm bored of receiving emails, but again, I think we've just come back to that one. Let's just get rid of that. There we go. Sorry, I'll come over here. Okay, so there's only one section left, and we've got 5 minutes to do it in. But it's the most important section there is. So I'm going to go straight into it. Chris, I mean, basically, as we've seen, there is a hell of a lot of stuff to do here.
Yeah.
It is extraordinarily important that people do it.
Yeah. We're saying earlier that for everyone that's filled in an ACE form or anything like that, if we think about the fact that we might, this is our only real best measure of getting some sector-specific support, and the best way of doing that is by doing through this. So although it may take an hour, please take longer if you need to. The actual rewards for this are potentially massive. Okay.
And this section opens with the key question, reflecting on your venue's answers to the issues surrounding 2 meter social distancing in section A and your venue's ability to comply with the government guideline objectives in section B. Is there any practical opportunity for your venue to open for a live music events on Saturday, 4th of July? And we very specifically mean in that question, is it physically possible for you to do it? Can you possibly do it? We're not interested at this point as to whether it's economically possible. We're interested is it practically possible? A very large number of you will have already worked out based on if you are lower than 100 capacity, it is almost impossible for you to open, because by the time you take, you move things around, we can't see how you get the number of performers and crew and staff in there that would allow you to have enough capacity to open. Maybe you can think of an inventive way. We'd love to hear about one, but you must just, in this question, we're asking you about the practical point. Regardless of how you answer it, the first thing that we need you to tell us is we need you to tell us the full cost for you of not being able to open. That means, what will your cost be if you are unable to open? And you need to tell us exactly. We've got sections coming up where you are able to tell us, do you pay rent or mortgage?
Yeah, this is very similar to stuff that a lot of the local coordinators have been going through to establish what we've done already. So I apologise if we're duplicating that, but of course that may have changed over time, and it's important that we have a really up-to-date figure on each of these things for you. So it's things like your rent, whether or not your mortgage payments, things like that. It then goes through to look at your staff, and how much your ongoing costs for your PAYE staff and for anyone who's self-employed. And then it goes into things like business rates. It gives some advice, of course, because we've had business rates relief, but some people may still have to pay it. Goes through VAT and income tax there, whether or not you've got any outstanding liabilities that you may have to pay. And then it looks at things like utilities. So this is your gas, your electric, water, internet, and phones. And these are all figures, just to be important. These are per month. If you haven't got it per month, please change it down. So like your VAT quarter, if you can move that down, divide by 3, take it down to the month.
There are suppliers and loans.
Yeah, suppliers. So things like your beer deliveries and stuff like that. Who do you owe money for and things like that. And loans if you've got anything outstanding.
Any contractual liabilities.
Yeah, so any kind of contracts, any artist payments, for example, that you've got due to go out. And then you've got here, we're talking about insurance and your ongoing cost of that.
Okay. Then we move on to the second part of section C, the cost of reopening your venue. I know that a lot of people watching this will have already decided it's not possible for them to open their venue. However, again, like the issue of how much we will need in a sector support deal, it is incredibly important that we explain to government that if it is practically possible for you to open your venue? How much will it cost for you to do that? And so in this section, we're inviting you to consider all the things that you may need to get, whether it's a one-off purchase or an ongoing cost. And you will see that we've got a massive long list here. Which of these additional items will you need to reopen safely?
Yeah. This checklist comes from all the things that are previously mentioned in the guidance before this, sorry, in the questions about the guidance before this. And we need you to basically identify as to whether or not it'll be a one-off cost. So that's an initial capital cost. So that might be buying a barrier, or whether or not it's an ongoing cost, such as hiring something in. And there are a few things which may well be both. For example, you might need to get like card terminals, which may have an initial cost and then an ongoing monthly cost. Please show that on there. We would say it's really worth taking some time over this, because at the bottom of it, there is a question here which says, once you've considered everything above, can you give us an estimate of what that total one-off cost would be? And then importantly, for anything that is an ongoing cost, how much it would be per event. So whether or not it's, you know, hiring some tables in on an event by event basis, whatever it is.
And then the important thing is, how many events would this deliver? If you were able to open the 4th of July, how many events do you think that you'll be able to deliver? So that gives us a thing of how much it is, you know, how much it's going to be, what's been achieved there.
Yeah.
Okay. So then that then takes into a section about what you would require additionally. I'm going to tick no, but every time you see one of these, the answer is probably going to be yes. And then the next screen, I'll do one yes.
I think it's important as well to say that actually what we do need people to look at here is actually almost the best case scenario, because we'd hate to kind of ask for money about, you know, we'd hate for you to say, oh, actually, we could do this, and then not factor in enough costs to do it. So
I don't want to say it's like the worst case scenario for what's the maximum it's going to cost you.
Yeah, it is. What's that?
Yeah. So,
but based on the, I'm just thinking particularly around the events, is to think, well, actually, you might be able to get some events and stuff like that. So do think about that.
I'm just going to call these out. Start with security, and as you saw, it asked how much it would cost you, and then we did the next one is stewards, but I'm going to tick no, but it would ask you how much. Then it's production crew. It would ask you how much if you tick yes. It's bar staff, would ask you how much, and waiting staff would ask you how much, and cleaning staff, and it will ask you how much.
Yeah. And we would ask people to consider here that, of course, actually certain things might involve you needing more staff in order to do it. Whether or not it's economically viable at this point in time, yeah, you might need that and to factor that in.
Just I would think would be nice to have an MVA thread where venues can estimate what each thing costs and share that knowledge. Absolutely agree with that. I think that's extremely important. Somebody says, for instance, folding chairs are £1 to £3 to hire. That's very important. Anything like that we can do to support each other will be very useful. Having done all that, you then come back to the key question, and this is the one that I think is probably going to practically you may be able to do it. Some of you may be able to do this. There may be very good reasons why you cannot. The next question we ask is the key question. Take 2. Reflecting on your venue's answer to the questions on costs in the above section, is there any practical economic opportunity for your venue to open for live music events on Saturday, 4th of July? And by this question, we mean, is there any way that you could make that economically sustainable? We're pretty certain the answer will be no. But we need you to confirm that. We need you to say no or yes. Some of you may be able to do it. But if the conclusion is it is practically not viable, that is one thing. If it is not economically viable, there is always the possibility, slim, that for whatever social reason and community reason, government may elect, as they have done in Norway and in Germany, to put up a large amount of money to enable limited capacity events to happen. If that's the case, there still may be practical reasons why you can't do it. But we do need to know the answer to that question. And then even more importantly, the next question, would opening for live music events without economic support create a serious economic threat to your venue, which might result in permanent closure? And I think this is really the crunch question right at the end of this, which is why it's at the end. We need to be able to report to government very clearly. Saying that venues can open because you now have some guidance does not mean that venues can open. And we have to be very, very clear on that. We have to make a really good case. Oh, I have to tick one. No. Yes, it would be. Next. And then you have now finished, and thank you for taking part in the REVS process. And in this section, you can literally write us an essay. If you have other things that you think it's important that we know, my suggestion is that you should try and bullet point those.
Yeah.
Try and give us like what the thing is. We've seen a lot of talk about ventilation. If you don't think ventilation is specific enough, is mentioned enough in this guidance, this is your opportunity to talk about ventilation. If you don't think that, if you think that something's missing, if you think masks can make a really big difference, put masks and then why, and then you can do that for a lot of bullet points and just put them all down. We can take those back to government and say, look, the sector says this is unmanageable, but some people are saying they've got really amazing ventilation, so they could probably do that stuff. Yeah,
I would also encourage people at this point, as we said, these questions are based on the draft guidance we've received from government. We've already done the work around the protocols and guidance, which has been sent out to everyone, which was, we had some really good feedback. And thank you to everyone who provided feedback about that. And we'll try and continue to keep that document updated. We're aware there's actually a lot of stuff we've put into the protocols and guidance that hasn't been considered as part of that. And it may be that some of those factors also prompt you to think about things, why it is that your venue can't open, and to list it there as to what it is.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry that took so long. It's an hour and 5 minutes. It was the fastest I think we can do it. This video will be remaining in the MVA group for you to watch at any time. It will also go onto our YouTube. I'm going to download it and put it on there. If you were not able to watch it live, I'm going to put a note underneath and I'm going to indicate where it is. It is well worth you watching this video before you come to the meeting, because in these meetings, we really don't want too many questions about the form. We don't want too much stuff about that. What we really want is we want you to have the opportunity to respond to the form, give us lots more questions to take back to government, and let's get a really strong message back to them about what is achievable and what is not.
Mark, can we also talk about the timeline as well that we need for having these back in?
Sally, you're right. We don't have any events in July and August. Most have been cancelled by the promoters. That is a very key thing that is not in their guidance, but it is a practical issue that you can describe to us, that despite the fact that you might be able to do it, then that's it. Okay, so the timeline here is really tight. We would not be doing this at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night. We wouldn't be doing this on a 6 o'clock on a Saturday night if we were not absolutely up against it. We are holding meetings Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in the MVA Facebook group and in the email you've just received from us. Please pick a meeting to come to that works well for you. You can come to more than one. They're going to be large meetings, we hope. If you have questions on Monday, we will be mailing you about how to put those questions in. Make sure you watch this video. Probably by the time you come to the Monday thing, you may even want to start taking the form anyway. But we need your responses to this form. We need you to find an hour to do these 4 forms and get them to us, and you must do that by 8 o'clock at the latest on Thursday. That is Thursday the 11th of June, which is in 5 days' time. I'm going to tell you, I don't think we've ever asked you to do anything as important as this. In the 6 years that we've been going, I doubt there is anything that we've ever brought to you that is more likely to prevent the closure of your venue if you take part. If you do not take part, Music Venue Trust cannot talk about your problems. We cannot get you the support you need. We will try and get support for everybody who fills in the form. We'll try and do everything we can to extrapolate it. But if you don't involve yourself in this process, please look at my face. This is extremely serious. You are in trouble. If you cannot find an hour by Thursday the 11th, get an echo. If you cannot find an hour by Thursday the 11th at 8 p.m., you're not serious about keeping your venue open. That's what I'm telling you. We're serious about keeping it open. We've put all this effort in. This is what we need you to do. Bit of a hectoring, a bit of badgering going on at the end there, but there are now nearly 800 of you. We absolutely need 800 of you to do this form. And at that point, I'll go into government and I can probably get us what we need. But every person who doesn't fill it in is another person. The government minister is going to say to me, well, apparently you only need the money for 798 or 790 or 600 or 500 or 4. And that'll be the deal we get. And we will not be able to share that out 50% for everybody. It will go to the people who filled in the form. Can't make it more blunt than that.
I think the other thing to consider as well is we don't want you to rush it. We want you to take time to do it. And actually, what I would say is we've already shown in this thing that there are a couple of things we might need to fix. If that is the case, please let us know. But also, I would say consider it, go through it and look at things. You don't have to click submit until you need to. Mark, do we have a procedure in place in case someone needs to amend their answers? That was the only thing I was thinking as well.
We'll pick that up as we go along. But yeah, I think we probably will introduce that. But the main thing was to get the tool out there and get everybody going. Right, I'm afraid that overrun by 9 minutes, but I didn't think we could do it any faster than that. I did try and whiz through. You can probably do each of these sections. If you're organized, you can do them in less than 15 minutes. It won't take you an hour if you get yourself organized. Everybody, please. Chris, when we were looking at each other at about 3 o'clock in the morning yesterday, I think I said to you, if we can start until 3 o'clock in the morning, everybody can find an hour to do this. Okay?
Yeah. Into context, I run a venue and I've stopped doing everything for my venue because I do know that the only way my venue will survive is if government listen to us, and the only way we can do that is through doing this form. So please, Bob, fill it in, please.
Okay, right. Wave goodbye, Chris.
Goodbye, Chris.
Thank you so much for your time again. And to you and the whole team that brought this together. It was a huge effort. But we've now given you the tool. So thank you so much, Chris. It's really appreciated. See you, Chris. And goodbye, everybody. I'm going to not go and do the form because I've already done it 400 times. I'm going to go and have a sandwich. There you go. That's been coming for fucking 72 hours. Right. Shouldn't have sworn there. That'll get us blocked by YouTube. Right. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please watch this again if it's helpful to you. Please make sure everybody else watches it. It's going to be here. It's going to be in every Facebook group. The links are in there, and they're also in your mail inbox. Please take part. Speak to you all soon. See you Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday for one of these meetings. Thanks again.